I'm Dave, welcome to our Friday roundup of EV news from around the world. And we open with Legacy Auto is ditching EVs like it's a dose of the flu. Well, the first of these, Volkswagen, they were one of the first in the early days. They came out with the ID3, and this was on the back of the Dieselgate scandal. They got caught out fiddling all the figures, got billions of pounds in fines, and they decided the only way out of this is to come up with something totally new, and they launched pretty much the EV in Europe. They were one of the early ones off the block. They came out with the ID3, quite a nice little car, and ID4 and ID5. So they were one of the forerunners, and when you look at the total number of EVs sold around the world, they're one of the bigger ones, something over 200,000 a year, compared to Ford, 75,000, and General Motors, 72,000. So they're one of the big players, up with the Hyundais and the Kias and all the others. But they've just announced, whoa, we've changed our mind. And what we want is our customers happy. They need to buy petrol cars. So we're going to stop EVs, going to abandon all the plans we have. And we're going to go back to ICE cars. Oh, and a few hybrids as well. Only we won't lie about the figures this time. Yeah. So I just wonder what's going on, you see, because they've spent the last, since about 2018, 2019, just spending money after money after money developing their EV market. They got the ID3, the ID4, the ID, what are they on now, 5, 6 and 7. Loads of things announced, the new VW Buzz. And there's all sorts going on. And now they've just announced, whoa, let's stop, go back to petrol cars. It does seem a very strange thing. So are they saying they wasted all that money and they should have just been making petrol cars all the way along? Would have saved them a fortune. Are they saying they can't get the cars right, so we're just going to have a break, do some petrol cars to get a bit of money in the bank, and then we'll come back with some even better EVs? I don't know. We're not getting any clues from Volkswagen, so we'll have to do a little bit more digging. Well, Toyota's next in line. They've just had a really good quarter, Q1 of 2024. They've got record sales of ICE cars, record profits thanks to ICE cars, and of course their EV attempt, the BZ4, I thought that one died a while ago, but no, they're still doing them. But once again, they are saying they chose correctly. They chose, they've been telling us all along, EVs are not the answer. So you have to question, if EVs are not the answer, why did they make the BZ4? Why did they announce this? They've got this solid state battery they keep on coming out with every few years. We've got a battery that, Why did they do all of that? Why, just before Christmas, did they announce a brand new EV lineup? Going to be launched, whole new range of model. CEO was up there on stage claiming this is the future, etc., etc. They then claimed in writing, the future is EV and hydrogen. But turns out now it's petrol. Or is it? Well, once again, I would suspect if Toyota are happy making petrol cars, hybrid cars, carry on doing it. Your only danger is there's a potential that the market will disappear from under you. So while you want to make ICE cars, and while you are good at making ICE cars and you make a lot of profit at them, if all your market is switching into EVs, then you're going to make a lot of cars that you can't sell. And this is what's already happening. One of the big markets for Toyota was China. They used to sell a lot of cars into there. China this year is going to be 50% of all new cars are going to be EVs. Absolutely. The rest will be locally made hybrids and others, and a few foreigners, the Japanese, the Europeans, the Americans. But the market in China is very, very, very small now for petrol cars, diesel cars, or hybrids. So the Chinese market, the biggest car market in the world, is now pretty much off limits to Toyota. It's a strange move, and it's a gamble, because if they're wrong and the ICE market or the hybrid market just continues to shrink and die up, then they're not going to be able to make any money. And at a certain point, they're going to have to go, well, we can't do this anymore. We're going to have to go either hydrogen or EVs. And at that point, they will be years behind everybody else. So once again, is this genuine? Are they actually concentrating 100% on petrol and diesel and hybrids? And are they abandoning EVs? Or is this some secret ruse that behind the scenes they're working flat out? They've got half the factory and technicians and development teams all working on this super duper battery that is going to come out 1 year, and they're just going to sweep the market. I don't know. They certainly have the potential for doing that. Far greater than America. America's such a dinosaur. A lot of Europe is the same. So I don't know. I'm beginning to think that there's more going on than we're actually seeing. Next on the line is JLR, Jaguar Land Rover. They've just announced, they're rolling back on EVs. They're using some of the new plants in the UK, and they're going to convert it to making petrol models. But at the same time, they're announcing that they're producing a specialist GT version of the Jaguar, all electric, for the American market. This is getting so confusing. So, Jaguar again, like Volkswagen, were one of the very early adapters into EVs. They came out with the car of the year, the Jaguar I-Pace. How it got that, I'll never know, because they've never sold any of them. Anyway, so they came out very early on. That car has plodded along, had a facelift or two along the way, not selling very well at all. They've announced some new EVs a few months ago, and now, well, we're still going to be doing the EVs, but the petrol ones actually are now going to take a lot of priority. So, are they saying petrol's now the answer? How much did they lose on the EV escapade? Or trial, whatever you like to call it? It must be an awful lot of money. And you've got to think that maybe they got it wrong. Anyway, Jaguar Land Rover, they will be making EVs. There's a new one coming out for America, but they're also going to be making petrol ones at the EV plant. Yeah, okay. Weirder and weirder. Okay, so I think we need to take a bit of a time out now and see what on earth is going on. And when we start looking into things, there's quite a logical reason for this. See, there are two things that we need to be looking at. Now, the first one of these was that we in the West handed most of our manufacturing straight over to the Chinese, just gave it them. Everyone, the Americans, the Europes, the Australians, everyone just gave all their manufacturing industry over to the Chinese. And we got the Chinese to make things for us, and they were rubbish, cheap tat, as they say. However, those who took an interest in their products, and I'm talking here about people like Nike, talking about iPhone, talking about Dyson Hoovers, Burberry clothes. There's a whole list of companies that we think are Western companies, but they're actually just manufactured in China. And all that happened years and years ago, we realised there was very cheap labour in China. They were really keen to get the West to invest in their economy and help boost their economy. And they just took all the orders, and that was absolutely fine. When they started making stuff, it was absolute garbage. However, the likes of Nike and iPhone, Apple, they sent their experts, their quality control experts over there. And they said, no, you can't chuck out that rubbish. Here's how to do it properly. They trained up some of the locals to be quality control engineers, and they trained up the staff to actually make decent products. And over the years, these products have become as good, if not better, than anything they can make at home. But they would never pay the labour price at home. So what they're getting now is really cheap labour, but the quality is right up there with everything else. And we've taught them this. We've trained this. So in our bid to get some cheap labour, we have actually set China up to take over. It seems a strange thing to do. If you've got a manufacturing industry, which all of the Western countries have, Why on earth would you just give that to the Chinese? And one of the reasons is it's money again. Over there, the labour is cheap. Lunch breaks, give them a bowl of rice, that'll do them. And they have such lax of environmental regulations that you can just pump out all your pollution without it costing you anything. So over in the West now, we find that most of the stuff that we buy is Chinese. All the toys we buy at Christmas, the cheap plastic stuff, the wooden stuff, everything, it's all Chinese. It's all Chinese copies. Everything we do, a lot of trainers, a lot of clothes, a lot of electronic gear. It's all Chinese, all Chinese. And the quality now is actually really, 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 really good. I mean, I'm thinking you're probably watching this video, some of you, on an iPhone. That was made in China. Have you got any worries about the quality of your iPhone in your hand? Well, what this did, this allowed the Chinese to become huge manufacturing giants. And it was driving down costs to an absolutely ridiculous level. And it was producing products that were really, really cheap to make and could either be sold really cheap in huge quantities, the tat we buy at Christmas, or we could sell it at a high premium price, like Apple, but pay absolute peanuts to have it made. And that gives you a much greater profit. So the likes of Nike. I don't see the Chinese-made Nike trainers are sold in the shops any cheaper than any Nike made anywhere else. Of course they don't. If they can buy cheap and sell at the same price, that's what they do. So it's this drive for profit all the time. Well, the second thing that happened was that Legacy Auto, by the way, we mean the original car makers, the big ones, the Fords, the General Motors, the Stellantis, the Fiat, the Peugeot, the Renault, all of the original ones, Toyota, Honda, you name it, it's all the traditional car makers. And these seriously, seriously underestimated how popular EVs would be. And they dramatically overestimated their ability to just switch from ICE to EVs when they chose to do so. You see, it's relatively easy to train a computer engineer to hang doors on a car or bolt on wheels. It's a very different thing to get a person who bolts on wheels or a door to then go and program the infotainment system and tinker with the driver assist features on an EV. No, sorry, it's not different. Impossible in the short term. Yeah, send them off to university, get a degree in electronics or programming, and then come back in 5, 6, 7 years actually able to do what you want them to do, but not next week. So we had this building up all the time. We had the double whammy that people underestimated the impact that EVs would have. Some people want them, a lot of people want them. That caught them unawares. And then they drastically got it wrong, thinking we could just switch over to EVs. All we have to do, take out the petrol bit and the tank and everything else, bung in some batteries, they'll buy them, and we'll put the price up to cover it. And people didn't. And this is where you get all your scare stories about we're not selling EVs. Yes, EVs are selling really nicely, but the proper ones. I'm talking about these purpose-built ones which were built on proper platforms. And that includes Volkswagen. That includes the VW Buzz. So none of this should come as a surprise. China was effectively paid by the Western companies to get really good at manufacturing at low cost under very strict quality control supervision from the likes of Apple, Mercedes, Nike. The quality of those products became as good or better than that achieved back home. Did nobody really ever consider that one day they will have learned all that we can teach them, and they then go on to become better than us? And at that point, why would they make products for Western companies? They could just cut us out the loop, make them for themselves, and sell them to us. Same products. Now, a recent video from Joe Blogs on EVs and China. So I'll link to this down below. It's a channel I watch quite regularly. And he's clearly explained that China is on a bit of a drive. They are absolutely dominating the market in batteries and in EVs. And the one ambition, goal, driving force, whatever you like to call it, is to absolutely dominate the world and become the number one force in the whole world. And they've got the government that's able to fund them to try and get to this total world domination. But they're not just trying to get world domination. They also want to destroy the now unwanted Western companies that could be potential competition, or to destroy them altogether. I'm talking about this, I just suddenly realised where I've seen all this before. It's oil. See, once upon a time, 100 odd years ago, the West owned and controlled the oil. It owned the oil, owned the oil fields, owned all the equipment. All the engineers were Western, and they ran the whole thing. Then, of course, what we did was we started opening up our universities, business universities like Harvard, Oxford, to the princes and the sheikhs who actually owned all the oil fields and the oil wells and all the plots and everything. And gradually we taught them, they paid for it, but we taught them how to take over and run the business themselves. They very quickly learned that they absolutely needed the West. They needed it for their knowledge, for the technology, but only up to a point. Then, like the Chinese are doing now, they simply realised one day, we don't need the West anymore. We've got all our own engineers, technicians, we've got the oil wells, we've got everything. We've got access to the markets. We don't need the West. And gradually we've been booted out of the Middle East, and now they control their own oil. And they are a very large part of OPEC, which controls the world's oil supply. They simply don't need us. So legacy auto, we've seen all this before. This was, 100 years ago, 50 years ago. This was all going on. We were training the Arabs to take over the oil industry. We didn't think they were going to take over. We never thought they were going to take over, but they did. That's why they sent their top people to our business universities. So the future for legacy auto, if it follows the route of oil, is not very good at all. See, already they can't compete. And it's a shame. They try to sell the cars into China, but because they are not at the same level in technology and integration as the rest of the world, as the Chinese, they actually can't compete. People in the early days, a couple of years ago, would still buy Volkswagen, Mercedes and BMWs just on the brand name. But now there are so many companies in China making EVs, and really good EVs, that in actual fact they've now pretty much stopped it. At one time it was a status symbol to have a Mercedes or BMW. Now they're looked on with a bit of nostalgia. Yeah, that's what it was. What I want is a car I can go home, plug it in, and it'll run my house. Yeah. So what's happened is that the legacy companies have just trained themselves out of the equation. There's only one company that's still ahead of the Chinese, and that's Tesla. And this is a really strange one. The experts believe that Tesla is still half a decade or a decade ahead of the very, 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 very best of the Chinese in most areas. And they're ahead only because of one reason. That's because Tesla has chosen, contrary to 100 years of car manufacturing tradition, to make everything in-house. So Tesla to this day, they make the castings, they make the body panels, they make the seats, they make the wheels, they make the batteries themselves. They buy some in, but they make themselves. They design and invent motors themselves. They've got a massive big computer which is doing AI, and that's looking at the manufacturing process and actually changing factories to make them more efficient. And that's one area where the Chinese haven't yet caught up on. They're still a little way behind that. So Tesla's okay. That's almost certainly one of those ones that's going to survive. As long as they can keep this few years ahead of the Chinese, they have nothing to fear. Tesla in China outselling pretty much everyone else. BYD is the next closest. They occasionally go ahead of them and then behind, but those two are pretty much battling it out. So that's what's happening over there. But one advantage that Tesla does have is when it comes to full self-driving. And Tesla already has something like approaching 6 million cars out there on the road. Every one of those cars is and always has been linked to a central computer, and every one of those measures every single inch each car moves. Every single movement, if you put your foot on the pedal, it measures it. If you move the wheel, it measures it. It knows exactly what's going on. And this has all gone now into a massive big AI computer. And this is what is driving full self-driving. And that's the one thing the Chinese haven't got. They haven't got 5 or 6 million cars worth of data over the last 15 years. And so Tesla in that area again still has an advantage. Some very clever programming people over there on AI, and they are catching up at a rate, but Tesla is managing to stay ahead at the moment. A lot of it is just down to the data. The one thing about AI, in case anyone doesn't know about it, they don't believe in full self-driving. Full self-driving is going to happen this year. It's just been announced in China. They've got a license in China to run cars, and full self-driving cars are already running in America. We've got photographs of them on the road. No driver, nothing. They take off the door mirrors and everything. These are robo-taxis. So they're already out there. The problem they have, why it hasn't been launched officially, is that they're not good enough yet. Now, if you imagine back to when you started driving, most of us as children would watch our parents. Every time you get in the car, you see your father doing this and wheel and gears and everything else. And over 5, 10, 15 years or so, you know how to drive. You're sitting in the back seat, you know how to drive. You're just itching to have a go. You know all the things. You know all the speed signs. You know to stop at red lights. You know where you are on the road. You know which side of the road to drive on. You know certain routes. You know all this as a kid, but you can't do it. And then one day you hit your 17th or 18th birthday, whatever it is nowadays, and they let you behind the wheel of a real car. And it's a calamity. For the first time, you've actually got a wheel. You've seen it being moved before. You've never had to move it. And how many of us just, and then you have to snatch the wheel from them. How many of us just let the clutch out, stall it if you've got a manual car? And so our first attempts at driving are absolutely pathetic. And some of us don't improve very much. But most of us very quickly start learning how to control the clutch, how to change gear, how much throttle to apply when you're pulling away, how to do a handbrake start. And all the stuff that you learned over the last 15 years watching your father is already there. So you don't need to know that, there's a traffic light. It's red, what do I do? You know, because the last 15 years you've been sat in a car watching it. So what happens is you've got the mental knowledge of how to drive, everything that you need, but you haven't got the coordination. And that's what you learn with your driving test. They help you to learn how much to turn the wheel, how quickly to release the clutch, etc. And one day you reach a point where they decide, you're safe now on the road. Are you going to crash? Of course you are. I don't think there's anyone out there who's gone, certainly to my age, without having a crash of some sort. So we will still get it wrong once in a while. But once we pass our test, we are at a certain competence that we don't have as many mistakes. Well, that's where full self-driving is today. Forget what you believe, 20 years away, absolute garbage. What's been happening for the last few years is the computers have been just sitting watching videos, video after video, tens of thousands, millions of hours of videos. And this is like you sitting in the car, watching your father, watching the signs on the road, watching the road positioning, watching how to turn left and right. And they've been doing this, and they know how to drive. They know how to drive. This computer now knows how to drive. What it doesn't know is how to control a car yet. So what you've got to do now, this is like driving lessons for AI. You've got to give it a car and say, go and have a go. And of course, the first thing is, it'll crash. Like stall the car or whatever. You can't stall an EV, but you know what I mean. And very quickly, what happens is they get used to the car, the width of it, and everything else, and what to expect. And then the two start coming together, and you reach a point where your interventions are down to below an acceptable level. An intervention is where you have to take over from the full self-driving. Now, if you have to intervene every 5 miles, it's not full self-driving. It can't be trusted. If you only have to intervene once every 10,000 miles, all of a sudden that's actually now acceptable. And that's the point that Waymo have reached. Now Waymo are at level 4, but they're ring fenced. So it means that they're not allowed out on the open roads. They can only get set routes. But that's Waymo is ahead of Tesla in learning how the car handles the mental picture that the computer's got. So the Chinese are everywhere. They're ahead in everything. But interesting, in full self-driving, they've got Tesla as the first one with a license for full self-driving. There are robo-taxis on the road in China. These are ring-fenced. These are level 4. That means they can only drive on set routes that have been pre-mapped and pre-surveyed. And on those, you don't need a driver. They are absolutely driverless. They are very, very good, way better than the Teslas. However, it is only on very strict roads. So you couldn't jump in a taxi and say, take me to my Auntie Mabel's. Hasn't got a clue. So in China, the Chinese are still quite a long way behind Tesla on full self-driving. But on the legacy auto side of it, they're way ahead of them. And that's worrying, or should be worrying, to the legacy auto. So where are we going with all this? Well, we in the West have just created a future of very cheap but very, very good Chinese EVs, which is exactly what we, the buyers, want. It's not good news for the legacy auto factories and the workers. Well, in the meantime, we go back to Tesla, and they've just taken back on almost all of the sacked supercharger workers from a few weeks ago. What's going on here? Well, it's actually fairly simple. And the story came out at the time. It was ignored by the press, absolutely ignored. They claimed, yeah, Tesla's selling up. They can't make a profit out of supercharger. Just made up story after story. But what actually happened was Tesla is overmanned at this time. There's a slump in 2024, not just for EVs, it's for every car. It's for petrol, diesel, hybrids, everything. There's people being laid off everywhere. You know, your local council getting rid of staff all over the place. Everything is cutting back. It's not a good year. It's a recessionary year. And we were warned about this last year. So Elon decided that the company's overmanned. There's a lot of dead wood in the company, so we need to get rid of some staff. And he wanted to get rid of 20%. They had negotiations, and they decided in the end on 10%. And he went along to one of the departments, which was the supercharger department. And he said, we need to make some cuts. And the woman in charge said, well, in actual fact, no, we can't cut anyone. We need a lot more staff. And apparently Elon was not best amused. He'd gone in there asking for cuts, and they're asking, no, we need more staff. And Elon, in his logical mentality as a businessman, said, do we need anyone at all? Because we got people queuing up to buy these V4 superchargers from us. We've got the most successful network in the world. What do we need most? The superchargers or these staff who are refusing to make cuts? And he just sacked the lot on the spot. Now, you could say, well, yeah, probably not the best human resources tactics in the world, and I'm not going to comment on that. But the most important point I get out of this is the anti-EV and Tesla and Elon media has been shown up to be making up stories once again. You see, the story was Elon sacked the whole of the supercharger head office team. That was the news. What they reported was he's closing down the whole supercharger network. He can't sell his cars. He's laying off staff. The Model 2 has been abandoned. The supercharger network's up for sale. He's gonna, and that was absolute pure fantasy. There was no basis of truth in it. So like the scrapping of the Model 2 due to no demand. Absolute garbage. And it's made up. So in reality, the Model 2, obviously, it's been brought forward. The supercharger network, I don't know if anyone knows, but Q1 is the best Q1 ever in terms of installations of superchargers. And you can't just turn them off. The superchargers that are going live today would have been started 2 or 3 years ago. Your first stage is you decide where it's going to be, and then you negotiate for the land. You need to rent or buy or whatever it is, get a license for putting a supercharger on there. Then you need to go to planning permission. That takes time. Then you need to go to the grid and you need to ask them, can you get power there? And so this all takes time, probably a year or so before someone sits back and goes, actually, this is now a viable site. We've got the planning permission. We've got the grid saying they can supply power to us, and we're about ready to go. Now, at this point, when the grid wants to lay the cables, you've now got to negotiate with all the surrounding companies, landowners, everything, to get the cable across their land from the nearest pylon or substation to where you want it. That takes time. And then eventually you get the diggers in, you dig the plot flat, and then you get the installers in and they install it. So from when it actually turns on at the end of the process, it could easily be 3 years from when they first said, let's put a supercharger here. So right today, even if Elon sacked the whole of the supercharger team, the first thing is there's a load in the pipeline. They're not going to abandon them. What a waste of money. All these which are nearing completion, well, it's far quicker just to finish them off. Now, talking about the media, I just had a thought the other day about Watergate. Those of you a certain age, this was a big scandal back in the 70s, I think it was, Nixon. And what it was there was a lot of real serious corruption, criminality, illegal things happening, immoral things happening at a presidential level. Spying on the opposition, planting story. It was an absolute disaster. And the Washington Post actually cracked the story. They got a whistleblower and they were told that all this was going on. It's the story of the century. And so they did their own digging and everything else, and they knew they had a really good story. This was a Pulitzer Prize winning story. And so they put everything together. And in the film, and this really struck with me, in the film, they go into a meeting, and in the meeting, there's the editor, the sub-editors, some researchers, secretaries, and solicitors. And what they do, Woodward and Bernstein, they present the evidence and say, this is the story we want to print. It will be President Nixon needs to be arrested. He's broken the law. And the lawyers look at it and they go, no, you can't publish that. We'll get sued. We'll be finished as a newspaper. You need more. You've got one source, one whistleblower. How do you know that he or she isn't lying to you or exaggerating or making it up, whatever? You need to go and get at least one more source before we'll even look. And Bernstein and Woodward, they went, no, the others are going to get on the story. This is a scoop. This is a Pulitzer Prize we've got. And the lawyers said, no, you can't. And the editor backed the lawyers. He said, you can't launch it, release it, print it as it is. You don't have the proof. So in the end, they went back and they tried, and people just clammed up. They wouldn't talk. And then eventually someone else came along and actually said, I'm disgusted with what's going on. This needs to be exposed to the public. I will give you the information. I'm not going to testify personally, but I'll give you some copies of the documents. So they now had two sources, and Woodward Bernstein went straight back to the editor and the solicitors and said, whoa, we're ready to go. No, you can't print. Watch the film. It's really, really, really fascinating for how the media worked back in the 70s. And how many times they went to that meeting and they were told, you haven't got enough. We'll get sued. You can't do it. And they went again and again, and then eventually they found another source, and this was a really credible source who would go on record. And they went into the meeting and they said, you can't launch it as it is. We can only launch a smaller stuff. No, we want to do the full. No, you can't. You don't have the proof. Now, when we launch it, we may get more proof and we can expand it, but you can only print what you can prove. That is the key. That is what struck me when I watched that film. Go and watch it, All the President's Men. Really good film. The number of times they went to the editor and the lawyers and said, we were ready to print it. No, you're not. You can't do it. Get your proof. And even when they got the proof, you can't print it all. Some bit is supposition. You can only print the facts that we can prove. And even then, when they notified the president that they were going to be launching this the next morning, it was on the printing press at the time, and their reaction was, the president's reaction, yeah, we'll sue you. Yeah, we'll just... but they had enough proper proof that the story was genuine. Now, the story got very much bigger. People started coming forward in big time and it just blew up into the biggest scandal in American political history ever. But where's that gone? What's happened to the media? We need these massive explosives, these stories, but we also need facts, not gossip or speculation or guesses or whatever will get them the most clicks. I really suggest you have a look at that. It's back in the days of when the media did what it was meant to be doing. Well, those were the days. Oh, Mary Hopkins. Anyway, Stellantis. Oh, I get baffled at the beginning of this video about who's doing what. Are you cancelling EVs? Are you not? Stellantis is doing everything all simultaneously. CEO is Carlos Tavares. He wants Chinese tariffs imposed on Chinese imports. But now he's just announced a deal between Stellantis and Leapmotor, a major Chinese manufacturer, and he's proudly announced that this summer there are 6 brand new budget EVs coming into the European market. It baffles me. Oh, they're very likely to be high-tech and ultra-budget prices. Exactly what we buyers want. How many people have been shouting EVs are too dear, we want budget ones? Yes, but I tell you what, some of you out there will be going, oh, Chinese rubbish, wouldn't touch it. Hang on a minute. I don't know if you're aware, but in America, General Motors manufactures all of its Buick, new model, the Buick Envision, in China. It's not made in America, not made in Mexico, it's made in China. It's a pure petrol, no batteries, pure petrol SUV, popular car. And Ford has the Lincoln Nautilus. This also is not manufactured in America, not manufactured in Mexico. This is manufactured 100% in China and shipped into the USA. So I don't know if they're aware, but a lot of Americans driving around in these Envisions and these Nautilus, they're actually driving Chinese cars now. But because it's got a Ford badge on the front, it's American, it's Ford, it's a good car. It isn't, it's Chinese. So this presents a bit of a problem, you see, because if the tariffs do happen, what's going to happen to them? Are American cars, the Nautilus, for example, going to be banned from coming into America or have 100% tariff based on them because they were made in China? Don't know. But if he did ban them, that's not very friendly to General Motors. Wasn't it President Biden who said, Mary Barra, you did it, Mary, you led the way, you led the EV revolution in America? Yeah, I think we can expect to see some sort of fudge in the next few days. How can we let these cars in? They're American cars. I know they're made in China, but they're American. And not let the proper Chinese cars in. There's going to be something going on. It's got to come to a conclusion because President Biden is funded very heavily by the UAW, Union of Auto Workers, and that funding is absolutely critical leading up to an election later this year, November. So he is 100% committed to supporting every way he can for the UAW, which is banning the Chinese cars, giving the UAW workers a chance. But Ford, if they have their cars banned, they've got nothing to sell. I don't know. I don't see a way out of this. There's going to be some sort of fudge. Well, they're American. We ordered them. I don't know what it is, but it's going to be sorted out. But then, of course, the next question is, what's he going to do when China imposes their own tariffs on American-made cars and phones and foodstuffs and technology? And we can't sell, Americans can't sell into China. Tariffs don't work. Very short term, you can have a short benefit from them, but it's usually a period of getting ready to take over when they end. They're never meant to be a long-term measure, and anyone who does usually comes a cropper. Well, Mercedes, in the meantime, yeah, they seem to be going down the middle of the road. Could be a good move. They've not been terribly successful at selling their EVs anywhere in the world. They've sold some. I think it was just over 200,000 last year. They're okay. But they've decided they're going to stick with EVs. Bucking the trend. But they're going to abandon the latest version of the EA model platform. This is the future luxury one. This is going to be an improvement. They've been researching for a long time and spending a lot of money developing it. That's now going to be abandoned, but they're not stopping EVs. They're just going to go back onto the EV A2 platform. That's the one that's the EV, EQA, EQC, EQS range, and they're quite reasonable cars. Those are, I call the EQ range the traditional cars, traditional EVs. They are good, solid cars. They are good, solid, quality components. They're extremely high quality, perfectly put together, very comfortable. But the EQA is just a GLA with a battery and a 50% price hike. Well, Vauxhall tried that with the Corsa, failed to sell their brand new EVs at a 50 to 100% markup, failed dismally. Well, these models, including the EQAs, they're all over Auto Trader now, massive discounts, some of them brand new. Mercedes, they used to sell, well, the list price is 50 to 60,000. You can pick up a 1-year-old EQA for 36,000. That's heading on towards half price. Well, I hope they have a few more ideas, new ideas for the development of the existing EVA2 platform to make it a lot better. And not just pick another body shell from another petrol car or diesel car and just electrify it. It's not what customers want. Customers want proper high-tech EVs which are cutting-edge technology. Well, Renault take a step back from full self-driving. They're not even going as far as level 3. And level 3 is the point where the car does most of the work, but the driver has to be there to take over when it hits a problem. It will. It's not full self-driving, but it's getting towards it. And they're ditching that on cars. They don't want to go for level 3, but instead they want to go for level 4 on fully autonomous buses. And it's a move, I think, that will actually work well for them. We see first, the reason they don't want to go to level 3 is that level 3 is the level at which the manufacturer, the person who makes the full self-driving or programming software or anything else, is now responsible for half of the accidents. Not making half the accidents, but if you have an accident, the driver and the manufacturer have to share the cost of repair, replacement or whatever. So that's a big jump. Now level 2, they say, and this is stuff that we're getting now, and a lot of this is also available on petrol and diesel cars. This is driver assistance systems. And they say, well, 90% of the drivers are quite happy with that. Things like adaptive cruise control, automatic lane keeping, speed sign recognition. There's an awful lot that the cars already do, which is enough for most people. And some people would never let a car drive them anywhere, ever. So that's quite a good move, keep it at level 2. I also wonder, by the way, whether that's why Tesla only calls its full self-driving level 2. Interesting, isn't it? Because the Tesla level 2 autopilot is about as close as full self-driving as you're going to get, but they still claim it's level 2. Interesting. Anyway, back to the buses. Buses can be level 4. Now, level 4 is absolutely fully autonomous. No driver, no vehicle, no person intervention. You don't need anyone on board other than passengers. The bus totally sorts itself out. It can never get to level 5, which is full autonomous driving, because these buses and level 4 has to be ring fenced. By definition, all level 4 is full self-driving in a ring-fenced area. What a ring-fenced area is, if you've got a bus that sets off from the depot, goes to the airport, goes to the hotels, goes to the park, and then comes back to the depot, that's a set route. It always goes that route. That's what it does. Drivers don't in the morning go along, oh, I wonder what's down there, let's go. They don't. These are set routes. So what they do, companies do, full self-driving software companies, they drive that route round and round and round and round and round with cars laden with sensors, LiDAR, radar, ultrasonic, GPS, a million ultrasound. There's all sorts going on. And they literally plot the route to within a millimetre. And then when they're ready, they just tell the bus, here's your route, go on that route. You keep in the UK, the left-hand lane. If that's ever blocked, you can, on this section, go into the next lane, overtake, but then you return. And it's got all these pre-programs, and it just runs them brilliantly. But as I said, if someone on the bus says, take me to the beach, it can't go. It's got no idea. And that's level 4. That's good. And we're actually going to see these. Renault's working with some Chinese companies. And these Chinese companies have been running these buses in China, obviously, for quite some time. It's going to be fairly quick and simple. These pre-mapped routes, they're fairly, as long as they're fairly short, they're fairly quick to do. And it means that you're going to actually be able to get the mass of the people switching to EVs without having to buy EV cars. You see, if you put these buses on the road, and because you haven't got driver, staff or anything, they're much cheaper to run, or running off electricity, which could be produced by solar. They should be cheaper to run. Keep the prices down and people will take the bus. You jump on a bus, drives you, stops every stop, you jump off, whatever. And people just get used to it. There's masses of them in China everywhere. People are just used to them now. So Renault's teamed up with a company called WeRide, Chinese EV autonomous bus company. It's operating at the moment about 700 vehicles for the last 3 years. They're working with the French, and the first of the French buses, fully autonomous, level 4, this route's being mapped at the moment, is targeted for use later this month at the French Open tennis tournament in Paris. So for the first time in Paris, we're going to be seeing buses, fully autonomous, no drivers, ferrying people about. I suspect at this stage they'll be free, just giving people a taster. I think it's a good move by Renault. Keep level 2, give them the maximum they can driver assistance features for ordinary drivers. Don't go down the full self-drive route, but get your buses level 4 autonomous. I think they're on a winner. Renault aren't part of Stellantis, but Opel are. They're a member of the Stellantis group, and they've decided their future is EVs. That's it. EVs only. We're not going to make ICE anymore. We're not going to make hybrids anymore. We're going to make EVs, and we're going to be the best in the world. These baffle me because the CEO, Tavares, he's trying to get the Chinese banned, and he's saying, oh, we can't make EVs competitively, so we need a tariff on the Chinese imports. We need to be able to sell overpriced EVs, but we'd rather go back to petrol cars. So this 2035 ban, we'd be very glad if you would kindly lift it and let us make ICE cars for a lot longer. And yet one of his group of companies, Opel, has decided, no, that's not right. We need to be making EVs. It's the future. So they're going it alone. They're not doing any joint ventures with the Chinese firms that I've been able to establish. I just find it amazing. The Stellantis, it's got huge, what I call petrolhead companies, Ferrari, Lamborghini, and they got EV-only companies like Opel. Fiat are doing joint ventures. How is that one company? Well, anyway, here in the UK, it's our Everything Electric Northern Conference in Harrogate next week. It used to be called Fully Charged, but it's now widened out to encompass all things to do with electric and EVs and renewable and you name it, everything like that. So it's not just EVs, it'll be PV panels, it'll be home batteries, heat pumps, the absolute lot. And the great thing is, one of the drivers, the founders of Fully Charged, is Robert Llewellyn, and that's Red Dwarf, for those of you who know. He was Crichton. And he's actually got all this kit on his house. He's had it for many years. He was putting the stuff on his house when other people hadn't even heard about EVs. So he's been running this stuff on his own, paying for it himself for a long time. And so it's a case of he practices what he preaches. Well, I wish him all the success in Harrogate, especially as they've launched a big Bring Down the Media Lies campaign. This is really gathering pace. Fully charged or everything electric now is now starting to fight back against the media, jumping down their throats saying, that's a lie, that's made up, stick to the facts. I definitely want that element of it to succeed. Well, Ford are leading the world with multi-energy cars with the launch of new models that are going to be built in Spain. What? Sorry? Multi-energy? Oh, right. It's a hybrid. Petrol electric. That's multi-energy. Well, they got 2 new models coming out. They're targeting 300,000 cars a year. So it's a good size, a good number of cars. It's at the very budget end of the range. So it's very good. And this is, they believe, the market in Europe. But most of the legacy auto is already in partnership with Chinese companies to produce really cheap joint venture EVs, 100% EVs. So do any of these legacy companies actually have a stable business plan? Or are they just flip-flapping around? Try this, try that, oh, that doesn't work, abandon that. Because the danger is that Ford is going to get this factory up and running, and then all these other Stellantis groups, not Ford, Stellantis groups, like the Fiat and Peugeot and everyone else, and then independently Renault, they're all going to be getting into bed with the Chinese companies. The Chinese are going to be coming over here. They're going to be, in the early days, producing components in China, just shipping them in and bolting them together in France and Germany and Italy and Spain and selling them. And they're going to be cheap. And it does raise the question, is that by the time Ford gets this factory up and running, are the Europeans going to be 100%, yeah, let's have these cheap EVs. I quite like them when they're cheap. And they could find that the market that they're setting up this factory for may be a shrinking market. Well, in the meantime, Toyota are quite happy. They must be rubbing their hands in glee. EVs are failing. Possibly because they can't make a decent one that sells. Schadenfreude, they call that. But in the meantime, Honda are finally getting in on the EV world with massive investment, just announced this week, and a clear plan for the future where EVs will give them very fat profits by the end of the decade. So you've got Toyota next door saying, we can't make EVs, nobody wants them, they're the end of the world. And you've got Honda saying, actually, by the end of this decade, 6 years from now, we're going to be making a very hefty profit on them. One of them's going to come a cropper, I can tell you. Well, on this news channel, I'm rapidly coming to the conclusion that if someone tells you something, it's probably true. Well, somewhere in the auto world, no matter how ridiculous it sounds. Different companies have totally different outlooks, different plans, constantly change them. The wind direction changes. Once we had a nice clear direction, long-term plans, just minor tweaks, car model would be brought out and it'd be sold unchanged for many years, a few minor tweaks. Now, long-term seems to be end of the month. You can announce something at the first of the month and by the end of the month it's out of date. Unfortunately, and the people are going to hate me for saying this, the only country with a totally clear outlook as to where they're going is China. And they represent a massive threat to the whole of the Western world in so many things besides just EVs. And before you all leak down my throat and call me a brutal dictator lover, I merely report the facts. I find some of their practices and philosophies absolutely appalling. But then again, some of the Western governments are a very close second, and many of the Western multinational companies are even worse than probably edging into the lead with appalling, disgusting policies. Is it just me getting old, entering my Victor Meldrew years? Well, thanks very much for watching. I'm Dave. If you have enjoyed this, please subscribe, click the notification bell, and if you've liked it, press the like button as well.